Okay. Good evening. Sorry, I was slightly confused by the many screens that we have now. My name is Karina. I'm from the Matura Express English, obviously, and tonight is exam time again. A very short, very concise intro. It only said education. That's what we're gonna talk about tonight. Tonight's topic is school and education. I will, as always, show you the two exams. Again, as always, I tried to cover as many aspects as I could. So there will be one exam, which I think is the wrong one. Yes. The first exam is going to be about school and education and how things have changed in the past. Whereas the second exam will be about different school systems. So we're gonna, no, I'm confused. The first one will be about changes and how education has changed, how the roles of the teacher have changed, how the role of the students has changed, and also about schooling systems, comparing the UK, America, and Austria in as far as we can compare them. I think that they're quite different. And also concept-wise, there's a very different approach to the whole thing, so I guess that's quite hard. There is a text and there's some pictures, and in the second exam, we will talk about alternative approaches, about Montessori schools and about Waldorf schools. In general, I do think that education is a quite relatable topic for you guys in the exam. You all went through a good many years of schooling, whatever type of schooling it was, but then you probably do have some first-hand experience. There will probably be questions like explain the Austrian school system, explain its challenges as well, like you have to choose at 14 what school you want to go to, which is quite early, not the case in all countries. So you definitely do have to say something about, or you have something to say, sorry, about school systems. In Austria, you also probably do have some tips and pieces of advice on how it could be improved if it did. Well, anyway, I'll show you the first exam. Where is it? So, this is exam number one. Exam number one is the situation as follows. In history class, you have talked about school, history and development, and so on and so forth. You needed a presentation for your English class. Now you did some research. Schools have changed. How? That's the first question, first bullet point. What is different now to the time that your parents, your grandparents went to school? Major testing in Austria. So what high-stake tests do we have in Austria? High-stake tests are important tests. So you would have the Matura as basically the only high-stake exam that is left, unless you do some language certificates and so on and so forth during your school time, but I guess then they don't count as high stakes. So high stake exams are really important ones. As I said, I think there's only the Matura left. So, well, you're gonna briefly explain that. Testing on school in the UK and in the US, and alternative non-traditional ways. In this case, it's not about Montessori schools and about Waldorf schools. In this case, it's about alternative systems on how to get the A-levels, on how to get the Matura, on how to get the university entrance exam, the Berufsreife university without A-levels, and so on and so forth. Then we have the obligatory discussion. This time it is like a more into-depth thing about the American and the English education system, or the education system in the UK. But then one has to say that in the UK it's quite different depending on which part you're in. So Ireland has a totally different school system to England and Wales. Scotland does have a slightly different school system as well. So probably the easiest thing would be if you focused on the UK and not on Wales, Scotland and England, because as I said, Ireland is different, or a little at least. So okay, that's exam number 1. Are we ready?
Yes.
Yes. As always, in the first exam, because it will be 2, it will be 2 exams, as always. My bag needs to go because we don't have space. It's 2 exams. In the first one, Chris will adopt his beloved fake identity that we always have to take on for the trial exams. In the second exam, we'll skip that because, well, yeah, he's still the same person doing 2 exams at once because, well, that's fun. Or so we think.
I need my notes.
Of course, you officially already had 30 minutes of preparation time, so you can have as many notes as you want. By the way, you people out there, make sure that you have good notes, especially on such a topic. That it's a topic with a lot of facts, especially if you want to present dates and so on. Or not dates, but ages and so on. So you have to pass important exam at the age of 14 and 16 in the UK and so on and so forth. If your brains, like my brain, can't process numbers, you may want to write them down. So make sure that you have concise and good notes. I had horrible notes in my English exam, so that's why I always warn people. We're totally useless, Anyway, so good evening.
Good evening.
Would you mind introducing yourself very quickly, telling us who you are, why you're here, and what your future plans are?
My
once
name
you've
is
passed this great exam.
Chris, and I tried to pass the exam, of course. But at first, I want to talk about my future and my past, and my career, of course, what I want to do. So in the past, I started off as a football player, nice. American football.
Sweet.
But since I had a major injury, I had to stop doing it, and therefore I decided to go into education, or start to pave my way to being able to study. And yeah, therefore I'm doing the A-levels now, or try to pass them. And I actually want to become a biologist. Yeah.
Not bad.
So in research, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting career path from the football pitches of Innsbruck to the University of Innsbruck. Biology is a very interesting subject, though. Well, so it's a useful topic. University is education.
Yeah.
Education is your topic. Talking about education, what has changed according to you? How is our generation? How is the school experience different to what it was for our parents, for our grandparents, you think?
So school education has basically changed a lot since when I talk about my parents, our parents. I think that was a generation that still had some opportunities compared to their parents. But of course nowadays the opportunities and the possibilities are way more bigger, and you have a bigger variety to choose from, especially when it comes to choosing a school. There are alternative ways nowadays, as Montessori and so on. And especially when it comes to higher education, a lot has changed. There are programs. You can do, I think, whatever you want, basically, and you even can do it abroad. And I think it enables almost everyone. I think if someone has the motivation to do something or to study, it works out in Austria and in Germany and in Switzerland. I think you need money. But in Germany too, but in Austria, I really enjoy, and the educational system too. The schools, of course, prepare us to have certain degrees, or in this case, 1 degree. Yeah. And of course, speaking of degrees, that one major or high stake degree is, of course, the Matura, also sometimes called the A levels in English, or it's almost the same. Normally, you're doing the A levels, I just call them, after a few years of school. But there are other ways to get your A levels, or in this case Berufsreifeprüfung, where you can, of course, like me, attend a course at BFI or WIFI, where you can do the A levels in 1.5 years, I think. And there's another way, which is also the WIFI also offers it, of course, which is the Lehre mit Matura, which is also a great system or a great opportunity for young people. But it's, of course, quite intensive, I guess. Working and studying is not the best thing you can do, but a lot of students know it. It's possible. And yeah, that's another way. So there are a lot of ways actually to have your major exam that enables you to study at the university. There's also something called, that's a I can't remember the name. University. Doesn't matter. However, testing in the UK, for example, and in the US looks a bit different. In the UK, for example, we have an exam called GCSE, and they are at the end of the 10th and 11th year. So the pupils are between 15 and 16 years old, and if they pass this exam, they can do further education. After that, there is an exam too, and then they can do further education if they want to, of course. So there are basically the normal undergraduate programs, and then of course the postgraduate programs like university and stuff, and so on, not so stuff. Sorry. And of course the US system also works similar to this. They have a lot of testing going on at the end of the year, school year, so they kind of collect every score they had in order to then have a good score to apply for college or university. Yes. And what is left here? The bullet points.
I think that was it.
I've already talked about the alternative ways
Yep,
of reaching. Included.
You mentioned testing, which is always an aspect, like that's what you are here for as well. Testing is always a thing in school. You so professionally mentioned so-called high-stake tests. Mm-hmm. We do the Matura at the end of our school career, whatever it looks like. Yeah. Doesn't really matter. So it's one big test that is basically an all or nothing thing. Basically, like you can repeat it several times, but still a very important date. Which system is preferable? The American one, where you have big tests all the time and then add up, or ours where it's one big thing? Like, let's be honest, failing one Schularbeit in school is not a big, not a major issue. Like, fail one.
I think since you can redo the Matura in Austria, and I think because I grew up with this system, I prefer this system, I guess. I think there are some benefits to the US system too. So the pressure isn't that high because it's a bit divided and portioned, yeah, but somehow I think it's really difficult to kind of, you have it always, you think about reaching a high score and then thinking about university. If you pass the Matura, it doesn't matter which grades you have or how, maybe sometimes it matters if it's a private university or something. But a normal university, it doesn't matter. So you can, with the Matura, apply for university and everything is fine, basically.
So the safer thing, kind of.
Yeah. Safer approach is always good.
Both the American and the English system, English maybe a little less flexibly, but in America you can choose your focus in school. In Austria you can't, like, nobody asks you what subjects you would like to have on your schedule. Is that a system that would be good? Like, Austria is always constantly trying to improve its system.
Yeah, they try to improve it and make it like try to integrate the interests of pupils as much as possible. They try to. I think it would be a great idea to include such a system as the US follows, so the curriculum follows, into Austria's schools or school system, since it really helps the pupils or helps pupils to develop in their field of expertise, I guess. Yeah.
Which subjects or which focus would you have chosen if you had the chance?
Music, of course.
Music? Yeah. Nice. I was expecting sports or something, like.
Yeah, and sports, of course.
Music and sports. Well, you would have, you would make a good American. You would probably have gotten an American football scholarship, and then you'd be,
Yeah, super famous.
Super famous already. You would not even need the Matura anymore. You'd be super famous already. England has a lot of private, like, there's a big difference between private and public schooling in the UK. Maybe not so much in the US, but is it a thing in Austria as well? Is it important whether or not you go to a Privatschule or private university or no?
It actually isn't that big in Austria. There are, of course, private schools and private universities, but the thing with them and the things I know about the private schools, and I know one teacher, I think, from private schools. Of course, they sometimes have a little bit better resources, but there are also really good public schools in Austria that have enough things for the students to, I don't know, if we take, for example, iPads or something. If this is something that only private schools might have, I think already public schools do have it too, since they are, of course, not only financed by the parents. And universities, I know a friend of mine, basically, she studied at a private university, so at UMIT, and she told me that there wasn't that much difference, because now she is back at the non-private university, the regular one.
Well, I guess in the UK there's quite a big, or in the States as well, quite a big pressure on you as well,
Yeah.
so that you get into the good.
And the
like,
difference is way more bigger than here, I think. Yeah.
Good. I think that was it about education. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, well, there was a quick recap of what we did. Where did my bullet points go? Well, we talked about the differences, how the system has changed over the past 50 years, 100 years, whatever. Well, we didn't elaborate on it all too much. He was talking about all the possibilities that there are. If you ran out of things to say, you could probably also add something about the way on how pupils were treated. I think that's one thing that has changed. I think nowadays there's more respect, more equality between pupils and teachers, and so on and so forth. So that could be a point that you would want to mention as well. Nowadays it's very much this approach of teachers being guides kind of thing. Well, testing in the Austrian system, we covered that. What do the tests look like? He did not really talk about that. You could mention that it's one standardized exam. We are one of the very few countries that has that. Italy does as well, for as far as I know. They also have standardized exams. They always have had standardized exams, from what friends told me. So now we kind of have the same system. Has proven successfully in Italy. I don't know. We're gonna have a look what it turns out here. Well, testing in the UK, we covered that, and also non-traditional ways. If we had had more time, we would have gotten a bit more into depth with the explanation of the school system as such. But then I think especially the US education system is quite tricky, hard to explain because it's different in all the states. So in America, it's local governments can sort of decide what their education system looks like. So I would suggest that you have like the rough outline, a frame of what it looks like, but then don't go into detail all too much because it's quite hard. UK is easier, as I said, but different for all the parts that make up the UK. Slightly different at least. So also here you should have a general idea of what the thing is all about. I would focus on the differences and on the similarities. We pointed out a couple of differences. In America, it's a bit more flexible. You can choose stuff that you like. So I probably would not have gotten into natural sciences. Would have done languages or something. Chris would have gone into music or sports. So you can set the focus sort of, which you can't in Austrian schools unless you have those branches like the IT Zweig or the language Zweig or whatever they are called. Differences are also the ways of testing and the ages at which you have to pass the exams. Yeah, I think that's it. We're going to have a look at exam number 2. Alternative approaches to traditional schooling. Very interesting topic, or so I think. Simply because most of us, I don't know what the percentage is, but normally like most people go through standard education, Volksschule, Hauptschule, Gymnasium, whatever, and then Gymnasium, Oberstufe, HK, tourism schools, whatever we have. There are alternative approaches like the Waldorf and the Montessori schools. Their mindset is very different to the one that regular schooling has. So I think it's quite interesting. Your brother attended one of those schools and you talk about it now. You first, like in the bullet points, are introduced the Austrian standard system, types of schools, what target groups are there. Like the HTL does have a different target group than maybe the Gymnasium Oberstufe. Problems of the Austrian system, reasons why Montessori and Waldorf were introduced and why were they needed, what's the crack, like why do they exist. And then a discussion about the two types of schools. A comparison, maybe Waldorf and Montessori, but then also Waldorf Montessori versus regular schooling. maybe you are a fan of Waldorf, and in the exam your interlocutors are a fan of the standard, the traditional system, because they say Waldorf might not work. Whatever, you might encounter some skepticism on the side of your interlocutor, because that makes the dialogue easier. Discussing something is always more, like, it's always easier or more lively than just presenting facts. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
This time we're gonna skip the introduction. He's still the ex-American football player guy who wants to study biology because he's one fake identity per night is enough.
Something is wrong with the cameras, I guess.
Oh yeah, it's really interesting. We see each other on so many different screens. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
well, anyway, I don't know where to look like actually. Well, okay, so you have, I hope you had some time for school besides your
Yeah.
besides your American football training. Would you explain the standard Austrian school system, the types of schools, and so on and so forth, to somebody like me who is not an expert on the issue?
Of course. So basically the Austrian school system, you start off with so-called Volksschule, which is like primary school, where you start at the age of 6, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There are 4 years of school. Then you can decide if you either want to go to secondary education. I just call it secondary education. You can decide if you either go to a Neue Mittelschule, a Handelsschule called Hasch, I can't remember the name. Let's skip this one. Or Gymnasium.
Mm-hmm.
Which is called the Unterstufe. So there are another 4 years. No, Hasch is not Unterstufe, I'm sorry. So only 2 decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And yeah, after that you can decide again if you want to go to a Handelsschule Hasch or Handelsakademie Hack. Want to stay in the gymnasium, but then that's a further education, or yeah, basically, or only do the 9th year, which is just a regular school, which is called Berufsschule. So it prepares you actually for a job or for, yeah. And of course you can also attend a technical school like HTL, where you're trained in mechanical engineering or something else. Yeah,
Sweet.
Very technical. And then of course after that you can, if you have acquired the Matura, you can decide to either go to a university or more like a college system, I'd say, which can be compared with the MCI, which is a Fachhochschule in Austria. But there you can, of course, acquire undergraduate degrees and postgraduate degrees. Yeah, so I think there are a lot of problems and downsides with the Austrian system, especially because there are a lot of decisions to make for young people, I'd say. And normally those decisions were taken by parents, I guess, in a lot of cases, unfortunately. In my case not, but yeah. It happens very often that parents think their children have to visit or attend a certain school, and I think that would be better than if we had a school that lasts until the age of 18, and then we decide if we want to go in a job or go to university. And of course, there are other not projects anymore, but there were projects, and there's still something different compared to the modern schools or to the Austrian school system, which is Montessori and Waldorf schools. They have a totally different approach. They don't have grades. They have a more free education, I guess, so more freedom for the students, almost no pressure with studying intensively or pressure from teachers that really I don't know, want pupils to have certain grades, or I don't know. They really focus on the individual and try to make the best out of them, actually.
So you think that this aspect of individuality was why Montessori was founded, or Waldorf? This need of focusing on the student more than on...
It basically, the thing with Montessori was also that she was a woman, wanted to focus on the children's needs, basically, and not something that is predetermined in form of a curriculum to have certain knowledge. So more focus on the individual, what the individual wants to do and what the individual wants to learn, when the individual wants to learn. So a really good approach, I think. No.
Are there any, first of all, let's start with that. Are they popular in Austria? Like either Montessori or Waldorf? They are not the same. So.
Yeah, there are a lot of not a lot. There are a few schools, not very popular, I guess, with teachers that did university or studied at the university. With some, of course, but normally they're bit seen as the alternative way where there is just no pressure on the children or pupils in this case, which can prepare them for later in their jobs, of course.
So the argument would be that a school that doesn't have any rules and doesn't do any testing really, like the way we know it, it doesn't prepare you for life argument.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I guess so. Most people would think so. I don't really think so, but it is difficult, I think, with having no grades, or I guess they have some sort of, in the last year they need to kind of convert their assessment somehow to grades in order to enable pupils to go into further education, I guess. There is something, I've heard of it, but I'm not really into it, actually.
Well, I guess in the Austrian system it's hard to escape the grade system, really.
Yeah.
Like, there are grades everywhere. Austria is discussing the grades all the time. There was an article I read a couple of days ago where they said that grades in first and second class of Volksschule are sort of punishment, torture kind of thing. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. I think the grades in the Volksschule, especially in the first two classes, or I'd say in the first three, is just nonsense for me, actually, because that's too much pressure for the children. And I think the argument that the children are kind of need to adjust to this grade system is just not a good argument,
Okay.
because they will get to it sooner or later, and in the job later they're of course confronted with somehow assessment and pressure from their boss or something, or being not good enough, I don't know. Yeah, so I think it's really bad to assess with grades in the Volksschule.
No,
I think that's nonsense.
quite early probably.
Don't need it.
In back to the beginnings, you mentioned that in Australia you have to choose very early, and that most of the time your parents do it. So
Yeah.
you would be, or frequently your parents do it. So you would be a fan of the Gesamtschule, like one school for everyone, basically. Would
Yeah.
that be?
Totally, yeah.
Where's the individuality in that then? If you are really good at like technical stuff and have to go to a Gesamtschule, is that not a waste of your technical?
Yeah, I think
Like,
it is really difficult to, let's say, come up with a good functioning system, since you have to cover a lot of interests, a lot of topics, a lot of subjects, so that every pupil can be supported in a way that he or she gets most out of it, actually. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess that's why Austria in the beginning, or in the first place, tried to make so many schools, but then there's room for improvement. I
Yeah.
think. Well, yeah, that was it about alternative schooling. Time's up already. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Time's always up quite quickly, really, especially because the bullet points usually take a while. Well, yeah, we talked about the standard school system, easy, like home play for you, really, because you know it quite well. If you had, like, if before going into the Matura, or if before your apprenticeships you did go through some sort of schooling, you can also describe your experiences in HTL or whatever you did. Problems and downsides. Well, one of the downsides we mentioned, you have to choose quite early. You could also mention the lack of flexibility, as we said in the first exam. In some countries you can choose your field of interest. You can't choose your whole curriculum, because then some people would just kick out, I don't know, maths entirely, which is not the point. But you can set a focus. Another problem could be the testing thing. If you're not a fan of big tests, you could criticize the Matura, you could criticize the standardization of the whole thing. Waldorf and Montessori, in that case, plays or kind of links the first 2 points, because they were introduced because the Austrian system is not very flexible. Doesn't place a lot of emphasis on the individuality of the student, which was a point he mentioned. That was good. Yeah, I think that was it. As I said, a topic where you can draw a lot on your own experiences. The Austrian and the UK system, make sure that you have an idea about them, that you have a system. I would not go into too much detail, because, as I said, it's very complex and you might talk yourself into trouble. Make sure that you have a thorough knowledge of how it works, what options you have. In England, you have the option of going to private schools and public schools. Boarding is also something that is way more popular in England than it is in Austria. So many schools are boarding schools. You have to stay there for the week, because that plays more into the hands of the English school system, because you have to do some after-school activities. I don't know, different types of clubs, chess club, discussion clubs, swimming clubs, whatever. So that's also a major difference. We don't really have that in Austria. Hardly anyone I know or have known went to a boarding school. So yeah, find some differences and similarities that you like, that you can talk about. As I said, make sure you have a thorough, basic idea about the school systems. Austria is fine, you know that. Yeah, that was it, I think. If you have questions, let us know. Thank you very much and good night.